8 years ago. We open to a disheveled living room of a small apartment. The room is made all the smaller by the thrift shop furniture clustered within. Heaps of discarded clothing, men's, women's, and children's, various toys, and several unwashed dishes decorate the room. In the far corner, a tiny and most likely furry creature burrows into a pile of clutter and trash. Through a wall of the living room, we hear the voice of a young girl ask, "Why are you doing that to your eyes?" We next find ourselves in a bedroom. A girl about 8 years in age sits at the edge of a large bed. A woman in her early 20s, dressed in tight-fitting and provocative clubbing attire, is in the process of applying glittery eyeshadow. "Well," says the woman as she studies herself with her phone, "someone has to look pretty for your dad." The girl frowns and mutters, "I think you look like a clown." "Do you now?" The woman lowers her phone. She turns to the girl and kneels on the floor at the base of the bed, getting to eye level with the child. "Maybe I should tell you what your daddy thinks of the way I look, or what we do because of it." The woman's lips curl into a twisted and malicious grin, but the little girl crosses her arms and stares at her defiantly. "My mom is way prettier than you." "Oh, Mary, dear." The woman shakes her head and puts on an all-too-fake expression of remorse. She leans close to the girl and whispers, "Your mommy's dead." "She is not," shouts the girl, her eyes watering. The woman stands up and laughs. "Stop laughing!" "Mary, Mary, short and scary, will grow up all fat and hairy. A bratty kid, and it's a shame. Her mommy's dead, and she's to blame." Sobbing, the young girl screams and hops off the bed, but her small assault is cut short. The woman crouches and digs her fingers into Mary's shoulders, holding them tight. The two are once again face to face, but through Mary's tear-filled eyes, the woman's face is just a blur of vibrant colors and sparkles. "Poor little thing. Do you want me to show you how to look pretty? It's the only way a stupid little girl like you is gonna get anywhere in life." A moment of quiet sobbing passes before the woman moves Mary's head in a nodding motion. "Good girl. Now stop crying. It's an ugly look on you." Do you have any, before we start playing again, do you have any questions for me? Anything to bring up before we potentially don't roll any more dice?
Yeah, I mean, I don't think so. I had a really good time just with the prelude because I enjoy seeing this as a comic book. Mm-hmm. A lot of the scenes that we paint together are very... I can see them as panels, like splash color. In the descriptions, in saying how things would appear on a page, I think lends itself to better being able to describe things that are happening indirectly, rather than just saying, I do this, I do this, I do this. I can say, this is what you can see around him. This is, especially the stuff with the speech bubbles, I think is one of the niftier aspects of comic books that I think is often overlooked.
And that's fair. And like, I think I mentioned it during the prelude that I was like glad you asked about the speech bubbles because I hadn't thought of it while we were doing it. The best thing is that since this is a comic book based podcast, even if we fuck up continuity later on, that's totally fine because comic books do it all the time.
Yes, they do. So. It'll just be resolved in a different issue where it's explained why those mess ups happened and how it was still correct in some way.
Yep. So I look forward to people pointing out how we screw up and then later correcting them in retrospect.
And saying, yeah, we were never wrong because, of course, we are the creators of this thing, which means that we can't make mistakes because we can always retcon and edit.
Alan, I think we can kick into the... It's not prelude anymore, even though it's still kind of prelude-y.
Chapter 1.
It's a chapter 1 that just focuses on your character.
Chapter 0.5.
Chapter
Prologue.
0.5.
Like, we had the prelude, which is more like the intro, and then maybe this is the actual, like, prologue to the story.
Sure, and then we'll have it like a prologue part 2 after this, and we'll never actually get to the real game.
Honestly, I would not be mad about that. If everybody else's comics go, like, 0, 1, 2, 3, and then the Doomed is pilot episode, prologue part 1, prologue part 2. Everybody else is on episode 6, and I haven't even joined the team yet.
Right. And your first episode is the same episode at which you confront your nemesis and end your character arc.
I mean, who knows what'll happen.
About a year, perhaps less, has passed since the events that occurred, since the dream sequence that occurred in your prelude. I'm imagining that some things might shift with Tate's behavior, with his family dynamic, with his lifestyle, and I'm going to ask you to do all that. The one thing that I'm going to insert into this picture when we talk about what happens over this lapse in time, this year, slightly less than a year since his doom really started to manifest. The one thing that I'm going to say is that your father, Hadid, after he became aware that you've kind of come into your powers, because your mom was definitely aware that you've come into your powers, he left the household about a week later, rather suddenly, leaving a recorded message behind saying that he's going to find a way to fix this.
Oh, man.
Neither you, your mother, or your sister have heard from him since.
That's very ominous.
I strongly imagine that with the abruptness of this and the circumstances surrounding this, that your mother probably contacted the police, did the missing person thing, and it's not come back yet. No real leads, even though it's been several months, almost a year.
Yeah, no, that totally seems reasonable action for her to take, and just to get into it, I will say that the household was probably very strained. Especially at first, it was very much a this is your fault kind of thing. Obviously it wasn't, because it's not like I had control over this gift/curse of my bloodline appearing within me. But at the same time, it happened to me, and he left as a result of it happening to me. Where the household might have been like a happy place before, it has cooled down. It's no longer a place to like spend time and enjoy each other's company. It's just because he's not there, and we all know why he's not there, being together just makes us feel what's missing.
Cool down is very fitting. I feel like your mother, Eleanor, she doesn't stop being a mom. She still obviously takes care of you. I think it's even really obvious that she still cares about you. She hasn't turned her back on you, but she definitely doesn't interact with you in the same way. And she's never in this time period met your gaze.
Which is totally fair. And I think, again, in comic book style, one of the ways that you can really see the effect of this is just the colors of the house. So if before you saw like these nice vivid shades of yellow for the like wallpaper and brown and etc., now everything is just a little faded.
Yeah. And I think that's because I think in terms of art style, as mentioned before, playing with like the vibrancy of colors or the dullness of colors is a constant theme whenever Tate is the focus of our perspective.
Exactly. And also, I mean, it is one of the obvious things that you see when he uses his powers, as everything is drained from around him. So even though this isn't necessarily because he used his powers, it is a direct response to him having those powers to begin with.
So I'm thinking that I would almost like to show the passage of time from Prelude to where we're going to pick up with a little bit of a splash page montage, a few panels just showing isolated scenes over the course of almost a year. What are some of these images that we see that show the passage of time and show how things are shifting or different or changed?
You'd have to start at the beginning. So after I had that meeting with my mom, you would have to show like the direct little bit after that of where everything is explained. And then how everybody like sort of came together, like we'll get through this. And then maybe a few days later, it's the same house, but now my father's not there. You just see like the recording that he left behind. This is future tech. I'm sure that it's some sort of hologram like message.
Makes sense.
And then you start seeing the little changes in the house, the colors being faded. Instead of eating breakfast together, you'll notice that there's often breakfast left on the table. My mother now has worry lines. She doesn't smile as much when we interact. Often her back is to me. So you almost never see her face in the panels if I'm looking at her. Only when it's clear that my character is facing another direction will you see her look at me. And just like before, like through the school day of how you would see the clock count down the seconds till the end of the day so that he could go practice his powers, you'll see a similar thing, but with time. So the outside of the house leaving for school, you'll just see the passage of the seasons. At the beginning, all of us together, maybe it was spring or summer or something like that. And then it's just the three of us, still going out in the morning. And then you'll just see my sister and myself leaving for school in the morning with maybe my mother in the window looking out at us as we leave, but not there actually with us.
Right. And you might get that image, but across two panels, the first one being Tate and his sister Sky leaving, and Tate looks back at the house, like longingly or reflectively or whatever. And then the next panel is him focused straight ahead, and that's where his mom appears in the window looking after them.
Absolutely. There's probably going to be a noticeable shift in his sister also. She's pretty smart. She's bright. She knows what's going on because she was part of those conversations. She doesn't hold it against me, but at the same time, we don't really interact as much as before. Like, she has thrown herself more into school. Before, she was popular, she was good at academics, she was part of the student council, and now she's picked up other things because she is also uncomfortable being at home, especially when I'm there, and she's been looking for excuses to not be at home. Yeah, so instead of us maybe coinciding or meeting up back home at the same time, she either gets home late and spends time with my mother after I've gone to bed, or, she stays out late, spends time with her friends, and doesn't come home at all. I still see her at school. I still see her at home. We are friendly enough, but there is a distance.
Right. So there's probably at the tail end of this montage showing the passage of time, a series of panels that show Tate coming home at his usual time, late after school, after blowing off some steam or whatever at one of the biomes. And he comes home expecting, maybe half expecting to see his sister or his mom around, and neither of them are there. The household has become this cold and unwelcoming place.
Exactly. And you can see it happen over time, right? At first it's just 5 minutes that they'll show up a little bit late, and then it's 15, 30 minutes, an hour. And now it's I'll get home at 5, 6 o'clock. My family will get home at 8. Again, if my sister comes home at all and doesn't just spend the night at somebody's house or go out of town on a school trip or something like that.
You said that there was probably a panel that explains the situation. I think instead of a panel of your dad giving some exposition, I like to imagine that the paragraph is this winding speech bubble that bounces between panels and slithers down the page between these panels as we're showing this montage. So it starts in the upper left-hand corner and starts talking, and will end at the lower right-hand corner.
Absolutely.
For the sake of, I want to say either listeners or readers, I'm not sure how to address our audience at this point. Matt likes readers, and I kind of like readers too. Voyeurs. Yeah. For the sake of our peeping toms out there who are listening to this, do you want me to narrate what your father is saying about what's going on, or do you want to kind of do his voiceover and explain it?
I think actually in the comic book perspective, it makes sense that it would be Tate's speech bubble sort of explaining everything, saying like, after my mother saw me in my room, she knew what was going on and she called a meeting of the family. We missed school that day because there was a lot to explain. Everybody seemed to sort of take it in stride. This is something that people knew about. It wasn't great, obviously, knowing that there's some sort of primordial being who was going to hunt me down unless I used his powers. But at the same time, I'm still a person. I get to make my own choices. I get to do what I want with these powers. But in that same vein of making your own choices, my father left. And he didn't just go. He left behind a recording saying that he was going to fix this in some way. But I don't know what he means by that. Like, what is there to fix? If I'm careful, if I'm smart, I don't really see what the problem is. I feel like I can do a lot of good with this. I feel like he's only seeing the negative, and that sort of stayed behind. You can see it the way my mom doesn't look at me, or in the way that my sister sometimes does. They know that it's my fault. Even though, again, I didn't do anything. That was his choice. It was his responsibility that he chose to give up to leave, to fix this. But nobody asked him to.
We flip the page and we find Tate once again, I want to say testing his powers, or, engaging in using his powers a little bit at a biome. I almost picture it like one of those horizon shots, so maybe he's silhouetted, and we might get some action frames of him doing super cool athletic stuff. What's on this particular night that we're focusing on, evening, keeps Tate out late enough that he would return home at maybe like 8 or 9 instead of when he normally comes home at like 6 or 7?
I think it's that idea that crime happens in the dark. Maybe he did go a little bit, practice his powers, and I don't know, is it fall now? Maybe start of winter?
Yeah, it's fall. We're looking at October.
Okay, then yeah, so sunset is going to be like 5, 6 o'clock, and that would be around the time he'd normally go home because it'd start getting dark. But maybe things have been hard at home. He doesn't want to go home. He wants maybe a little bit of validation. So he's going to walk. He's going to take the streets and see what situation would arise so that he can prove that he isn't just a destroyer, that he can actually help people and save them in some way.
Yeah, and I think as he's walking the streets of Horizon City, he notices, and we get some nice panels showing that the city itself is setting up for a very close holiday, a holiday that Tate may have even just forgotten about with everything going on in his life and his family. But it's a holiday called Remembrance Day, and it's basically like Better Thanksgiving. It has a strong focus on viewing one's place in the world, one's place in a community, and looking fondly on the things that one has and the things that one has lost. It originally came about as a post-World War III holiday and has kind of evolved into a more global holiday of unity.
Okay, yeah, I can totally see him having forgotten about it, especially with his family as it is right now. The idea of celebrating any of that is probably a little bit foreign.
Yeah, so we see him walking by people who are beginning to set up decorations on streets, decorating, I was going to say street lights, but I don't know if future cities would have like the street lights and street poles that we have today. But setting up like stalls, because there's going to be a festival downtown, probably at the end of the week that we're focusing on. A ceremony and a festival, very fair-like stuff, so you can get like cotton candy and fun stuff like that.
I also imagine that there have to be some sort of illumination. But I like the idea of street lamps, just better versions of them, because it is that brief moment of light in the darkness that sort of lets you see enough of what's going on. And it also, as these people set up the stalls, gives them a reason to also set up their own lights, potentially. Like there are those traditions in other countries where they do the flying lanterns. also in remembrance, or the floating ones, depending on where you are. And I feel like if this is a remembrance sort of thing, then both of those might be incorporated.
I think you're absolutely correct. So instead of finding crime to fight, we're treated to Tate walking through the city and remembering community and this holiday, and maybe even thinking back fondly on his family and how he celebrated this holiday in the past with his family.
I think fondly, maybe not yet, right? He's walking the streets. He's looking for something wrong so that he can fix it. And instead, he's seeing these reasons to remember things that are good. And right now, it's a little hard, right? Because things aren't good. It's hard to say like, oh yeah, like I should go spend time with the family who is sort of ostracizing me and makes me feel like I shouldn't be there, that I'm the cause of the problems and the reason my dad left. It's sort of, instead of looking for a bad guy, he's just seeing himself through these lenses, and he's feeling a little bit like he's being forced to be a bad guy, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I could kind of see that. Would that be why he's still feeling maybe a bit guilty?
Oh, absolutely. And also there is a little bit of that, the influence that was exerted, the idea that he is just a destroyer, right? Because look at what happens to his family.
Yeah.
He hasn't fixed that. He hasn't helped anybody in his family in any way. It's sort of actually taken them apart.
How long does it take? Because I'm going to tell you up front, there's no criminals to apprehend on this particular evening. How long does it take for Tate to not want to be walking around like this anymore?
I think like seeing people set up, I imagine that they're all reasonable people, and they'll set up until maybe like 8, 9 o'clock before they go home. And so just a little bit after that, maybe out of spite, maybe just out of a little bit of guilt, he realizes that he's been putting off going home because it's uncomfortable. But it's the same idea of he gets to make that choice of being there for his family, even if his father's already made a choice to not be there.
Yeah, so then him reflecting on that, we cut to him in front of his house. And the strange thing, I guess it's not so strange since it's so late by this point, but I think for Tate, from the sounds of it, it's probably strange to come home and see lights on in the house, to see it all lit up. And on this particular evening, that's exactly what it is. The lights are on. You know, at least one person is home.
And I think he's been seeing the stalls, he sees the street lights, but he expected to come home to darkness. And it is a little, like, I think this is one of those scenes where the colors will tell the story, in that you'll see as he goes through this thought process, everything around him dim. And then the moment that he comes home and sees the light on, everything is going to be very rich and warm, because even if it's not necessarily for him, it's still like this is my home.
Yeah, I like it. So we probably get a really nice shot of maybe from behind him looking at the house all lit up.
Oh yeah, he would be silhouetted by the light, so you can't see him.
Absolutely. And then the next shot is him opening the front door and walking into the light. But two things immediately jump out. One is that although the house on the outside looked warm and inviting and well lit, the transition to this interior shot, the colors are once again these muted tones. And the warmth is all too obviously gone as soon as he walks in. You know, as soon as we get this first interior shot. The other obvious thing is a speech bubble coming from like off the panel in his sister's voice and Sky's voice, just saying, "This never ends."
You can see him, like, when he enters, the smile, and then when his sister speaks and the colors drain, so does his smile. And he's going to stand there. He's not going to say anything. He's not going to do anything. He's just going to stand there for a moment.
So I think him standing there, we get the conversation between his sister and his mother, between Sky and Eleanor, that's happening in the kitchen. But our focus, our visual focus, is still on Tate. And they have a back and forth where Sky is complaining about the amounts of algebra homework she has. And your mom, Eleanor, responding that it's a fundamental skill to learn, math is, and that's eventually she won't have to do it for hours on end for a night, but since she's in high school, working her way up to a good college, this is how it has to be. And then Sky probably asks Eleanor if she knows if she understands like what this question is asking, and then Eleanor starts helping her with her homework a little bit, and Tate hears all of this, and they don't seem to have heard him walk in.
Once he's like, it's very easy, right? He came in, he heard that. It's very easy for him to assume that it was about him. He's taking everything personally. He's a 16-year-old male. He's angsty. He's going through puberty. It's not a great time. And once they settle into their conversation, he still sort of takes it personally because they didn't notice that he came home. And so you just see him, as the conversation continues, walk up the stairs to his room.
And we get speech bubbles that follow him up, still from the kitchen, and they just like shrink in size as this conversation carries on. It becoming obvious that they still haven't really heard Tate come home. What does Tate do?
He'll see him go in. He doesn't turn on the light. He just sits there in the dark. And you can, I want to see the speech bubbles coming in from underneath the door.
Oh, nice. Yeah.
So like you can still hear them. You still know that they're present, but he also still knows that there was no welcome for him, right? Like he came to this sort of realization that he was feeling guilty, that he hasn't been around, that he hasn't been putting in the effort, that he's been angry. But at the same time, neither have they. Like they haven't been filling the void, working with this. Is it his problem? Again, he's going back and forth in the same way that he's been going back and forth about his dad. Does he have to fix this? Right? Don't they have some responsibility too? And eventually he'll just get into bed and you'll see him lie there. The light is coming through from the window and it'll just be reflecting on his eyes, which are normal, which means that there's still that gray. But if you remember that when he uses his powers, they sort of change into a black rimmed yellow. And so the lights kind of just play with that a little bit before he goes to sleep.
The next panel is mostly dark. Next panel is dark. He's fallen asleep. And then the following panel is still dark, but we hear the sounds of people, masses, screaming. And Tate, you're standing in front of a door, an unfamiliar door, a wooden door. And there's like marble flooring underneath your feet, and the lighting isn't great wherever you are. And there's just this muffled mass of screaming coming from somewhere behind the door.
Is it coming through in like white speech bubbles, or is it coming through as like comic book sound without any speech bubble?
I feel like comic book sound. I feel like this is a sound effect, no speech bubble.
Excellent. That's what I was hoping, because he's going to hear that and he's going to try to open the door and like rush through. This is his moment.
Sure. And the doorknob is this old styled, like heavy iron doorknob. And it just feels heavy in his hands as he twists and pushes the door open. And as soon as he creaks this door open, he's flooded with the brightest light he has ever looked into. It burns his eyes.
He'll like fling his arm over his eyes at the brightness, and you just see him silhouetted against the light again. That is so bright.
There's this loud, thunderous crash that wakes him up in his sleep, and his house shakes.
And then it's the same image, but in the dark, flicks on the lights to figure out what's going on.
So he flicks on the lights, and he can see that some of the stuff he has on shelves in his room have toppled over. It's not like there was like a huge earthquake or anything like that. There's not like whole shelving units thrown over. Just things that are relatively easy to topple have been toppled over in his room.
Something should have broken. And I feel like it should relate sort of to the struggle that's going on right now. Maybe like from his youth, he still has like some superhero figurines. Maybe one of them broke. Again, throwaway image. You just sort of see it in the background.
They didn't sell very well, but Valor, the one of the old heroes of this future setting, he tried to market his image and his legacy a little bit. And so maybe you picked up one of his action figures when you were a kid, or it was given to you.
I think that's totally reasonable.
As soon as he flicks on the lights and maybe sees that, he hears from the hallway his mom saying, "Just stay in your rooms.
He's going to go to his sister.
If he opens the door, he will find them both, in their nightwear, in the hallway, looking down the hallway to the stairs that lead downstairs. And Tate's mother, Eleanor, is kind of standing in front of Sky's room, talking to her, or like talking down to her, like, relax, stay where you are. I'll handle this. And then they both probably glance over at Tate as he walks out.
He'll probably just say something. Are you both okay? What was that crash?
Sky says, I'm fine. I don't know. And Eleanor follows by saying, without meeting Tate's gaze, of course, she stays focused on Sky. She says, I'm not sure. There was a sort of a buzzing sound, and then the whole house shook. I think it came from downstairs. I should call the police. And she starts like patting herself down for a phone, I guess, and then nervously and hurriedly goes to her nearby bedroom to find a phone device, a future phone device in there.
Yeah, right? No, that makes sense. I think when she runs to her room, Tate will say to Sky, be like, yeah, you should go into your room. I'll go downstairs and check just to make sure that there's nothing wrong.
She slowly nods, and then as you start moving down the hall, as I assume you would at that point, you hear and like see out of the corner of your eyes when you turn to go downstairs that she's totally following you.
I think that's fine as the reader. I don't think Tate would see. I think it should be done so that Tate can't see.
Okay, so he has a pretty good lead on her, but as we see him go downstairs, we can definitely see in the background that she's following.
Yeah. And just in case, like, there's an intruder or something like that, he's not going to turn the light.
Because he doesn't turn on the lights, it becomes obvious kind of where the source of this is. Because looking around downstairs while it's dark, he can see pretty plainly this very strange greenish light emanating from around the corner in the kitchen where the door to the basement would be.
I'll sneak forward, like trying to be careful, because it's sort of, at first I thought maybe it was like a bolt of lightning or something, and maybe something just fell, especially since my mom now seems a little bit more nervous. And like, again, I want to be a hero, but what experience do I have as a 16-year-old?
Right, none, right?
Exactly. So it's like, oh yeah, I'm going to be a hero, but this is scary.
Yeah, 100%. Super legit. You have all the tools, but none of the experience.
Exactly. So now I'm like creeping forward into my own kitchen at night, and I don't know what's there, and it's frightening.
Yeah, and I think as Tate creeps forward, he feels a kind of like almost like a static charge in the air. Nothing like super heavy or anything, but it makes his hair stand up on like his arms and maybe the back of his neck.
I think that's a cool visual effect, because right now he's mostly going to be silhouetted, right? Because it's dark, and so he's just going to be sort of a silhouette with a very, very faint background that you can kind of make out. Obviously, it's the green illumination, whatever it is. And the thing that you're going to see most in the panel are his eyes. You know, before he was determined and sort of a little haunted, and now he's like, they're wide. Like, he wanted to be a hero, but he wanted to be a hero outside. And like, something is in his house.
It's literally too close to home.
Exactly. And like, he has family here. Like, what happens if something happens?
The stakes are so high. They couldn't be higher.
And so you just like, you see the green reflected in his eyes as he gets closer to the kitchen. And he's just going to kind of peek around. Like, he's not going to step in there stride like, yes. He's going to be like, what's there?
Yeah, and as we treated this nice visual of him peeking around the corner, it becomes really clear that this strange greenish light, it's almost fog-like, if that makes any sense, is coming through from underneath and around the cracks, around like the top and sides of the door leading to the basements. And he can hear from the basement the sounds of coughing, maybe gagging, and some sort of muffled talking that he can't make out.
I want to say that in that panel, it's sort of him in the archway. Like, you just see his head with the light reflected in his eyes. And just behind him, like on the stairs, you can see his sister.
Yeah, she's like peeking between the railing or whatever.
Exactly. Like, he's completely oblivious. But all right, something is in the basement. Something is creepy. So he's going to carefully open the door.
Yeah, and the first thing he finds out is that the door is hot. Like, it's not burning hot. It doesn't feel like it's going to explode if he opens it. There's not a fire on the other side of the door. But the door itself has warmness to it. That's bizarre.
You could see him flinch. Like, he reaches out to touch the doorknob, and then, like, you see him let go, and just maybe a thought bubble of, like, it's warm. Now he's both concerned and, like, what, like, is the house on fire? Like, from the basement with magical green fire? Like, what's going on? So now he has a little bit more urgency.
Yeah, so I think he opens the door, and we get, like, him standing at the top of the basement stairs, just with this green fog-like lighting all around him, just silhouetting him once again for, like, the 15th time this particular issue. And once he opens the door, he can hear rather clearly the sounds that are happening down below. Someone's vomiting, coughing, dry heaving, seems to be on, like, the tail end of vomiting. And there's obviously a different person talking. All right, mate, that's it. Get it all out. Yes, that's good. I warned you the first time teleporting would be very difficult. And then you hear a slight tapping between the gagging and the coughing.
Like, you'll see him cover his mouth and sort of gingerly make his way down the stairs. He doesn't know if the fog is actually, like, something that's bad to breathe.
Yeah, and what we see as he descends the stairs, outside of his sister Sky peeking around the corner at the top of the stairs, is we're shown what's actually going on in the basement. And what we see is that the basement, or at least where the stairs lead to, is a rather large room. If there was anything originally gathered in a pile in the middle of the room, it's gone. Like, anything that had existed in the middle of the room before is gone, and in its place is this... The best way I can describe it is like a circular symbol that's surging with this green light. You know, it's a circle with a couple of triangles drawn into it and a few wavy lines, and it's just emanating this green light. It's the source of this green foggy light.
Very mystical. For fun, can we say that it resembles a D20?
For fun, we can say it resembles a D20, even though the system doesn't use D20s. And in the corner of the room, there's an individual who's just hunched over, wiping his mouth with the back of his left arm. And leaning against a wall nearby is a slim fellow with blonde hair, wearing a light brown leather trench coat, a slim-fitting black t-shirt, jeans, and a cigarette sticking out of the corner of his mouth. And he just gives Tate a very curious, like, eyebrow raise as he just notices Tate's coming down the stairs.
Oh, man. He's going to freeze at that, like he was hoping not to be noticed. Does he recognize either of the two figures?
Focusing in, the individual in the trench coat just kind of nudges the one who's been vomiting with his foot a little bit, keeping you in his eyesight. And as the vomiting individual stands, Tate sees that it's his father.
That's what I was hoping. You'll see the smallest speech bubble. You can barely make out the words, but it says, "Dad?" ?
Hadid Temple quickly rubs off any remnants of puke from his face, from the stubble that has grown around his chin, and he looks upon Tate with these kind eyes. It's, like, immensely obvious that he's been homesick for his entire stay away from home.
As soon as he stands up and, like, you can see that his eyes... Tate's gonna run down the stairs and just hug him.
Yeah, you run into a hug, and then, to probably Tate's surprise, shortly thereafter, Sky, just like a speech bubble of hers pops up saying, "Dad?" And then she joins the hug.
Tate will definitely be surprised at that, but, like, at the moment, it doesn't matter.
And in the background, the individual with the cigarette and the trench coats just mutters to himself, "It's getting awfully crowded down here," and he just scooches out of the panel. He just sidesteps away.
Yes. And then I think Tate's gonna shout up the stairs, be like, "Mom, Dad's back."
Yeah, I think we're then treated to just a few panels of her, like, coming downstairs and approaching the three of you, hugging. Completely, like, ignoring, or no, she definitely looks at the weird guy in the trench coat, but she doesn't address him. And she approaches the three of you, and maybe there's that moment where she just, like, stops. She doesn't join in the hug.
Yeah, I want to say that there's definitely that scene where you see her face looking, and you see my dad looking back at her. But, like, again, I am obviously hugging my dad with my back to my mom.
Right. And they share that look for a little bit before your dad just, like, very carefully puts his hand on both your and Sky's shoulders and
he doesn't pry you guys apart, but he does nudge you a little bit, like, I step back and, I want to go see my wife.
Yes. I'm here to see my wife.
Yes, and if you guys separate, he'll step forward and he'll begin to, like, open his arms to her, and she just slaps him. She slaps him hard. And she, like, her eyes are welling up with tears, and he just looks back at her with still those kind, longing eyes, and then they hug.
And I want to say that the color scheme has been slowly shifting. Like, it's been that pale-ish color. Everything has been pale. But as soon as Tate met his dad's eyes and saw that he was that love that's there, all of the color just slowly starts coming back.
And I think as we begin to focus on this tender family moments of the temples being reunited after almost a year, we see that blue speech bubble from just like a little bit off frame or up in the corner of the frame from over by the stairs leading up to the first floor.
Well, if any of you need me, I'll be busy raiding your liquor cabinets. Hadid, mates. Just let me know when you're finished, alright?
Tate will make eye contact with his sister and, like, look around the basement to see, like, where is he? Like, how is he not here? How did he get past us to go upstairs?
She shrugs and says, I'm not going after him. I think what follows again is another little montage of scenes of just like the family getting back together, because the dad has some explaining to do. And the explaining is a lot of exposition, or would be enough exposition. And I think we can kind of frame it like Tate's narrative at the beginning, just weaving it between panels of like the family gathering together. And then you'll see this trench coat individual. We'll cut to him a couple of times as he's just like opening cupboards and finding like a small bottle of whiskey somewhere and opening it and drinking in a dark corner of a room upstairs.
Yeah, I want to keep saying that every time like you see him in the panel, he just looks at the camera and takes a step out. I don't know who he is or anything about this person, but I like the idea of someone who is slightly fourth wall breaking, who really just gets annoyed when everything focuses on him.
Right. There's definitely one panel where he finally finds the whiskey, and he's definitely in the corner, just like leaning up against the wall, drinking it. And the panel focuses on him, but it's him like pointing downstairs. Like, you should be paying attention to what's going on down there, not here. That kind of shifts into Hadid's voice as he says what's been going on. There wasn't a time where I didn't feel some regret at leaving all of you here. But when it became obvious that the curse that runs through the Temple family has affected Tate's, I knew that I had to do something, that perhaps I was the only one who could do something. I had to help my son. And to that extent, I took it upon myself to travel. You know the place your uncle kept over across state. What was that, Washington?
Pacific Northwest.
Pacific Over. He says, you know the estate your uncle kept in the Pacific Northwest. Your uncle, my brother. I visited his estate to try to find answers. He lived a life that tried to ignore a lot of this, a lot of what was running through our family. And since his passing, it seems that this isn't something we can ignore. So I wanted answers. I wanted to see if there was a way to help you, son. And he gives Tate like this soft smile.
Tate's a little nonplussed. They talked about this a little bit before his dad left, but there's clearly more to the story that he's about to learn. So you see him kind of like lean forward.
The answers that I found weren't in any of the books. The answers I found were in a person who showed up at roughly the same time I did. The same person who's upstairs taking the drinks that I offered him for bringing us back here so quickly. Nathaniel. And from the way it's been described, Nathaniel's at least half of the equation to helping you. Because, son, the curse that's been placed upon you is an ancient and powerful one that links you to something so much bigger than what regular people, what mortals are supposed to deal with.
I'll nod and say, yeah, we met.
It's my hope that working with Nathaniel, he can show you how to use the gifts you've been given against the source of them, and to one day free yourself, because it's something you unfortunately have to do. There's no way that I can solve it for you. And there's like that single tear as he admits that this isn't something he is capable of, that he cannot protect his child.
The determined steely gaze in Tate manifests itself again. All along, he knew that it was his fight, his choice. And I think that's one of the reasons he took it so hard when his dad left, is because it felt like his dad was taking that away from him. And now his dad just gave him that agency back.
In the aftermath of that, is there anything that you want to ask, like in the panels that follow as the family's kind of gathered? I'm sure there's probably some questions that your mom and your sister might have to ask.
Probably one of the first things, and I'm probably not the only one who's going to ask this, but just, is he back for good? Like, he's not going to leave again.
And your father nods. Without a doubt, I'm here. There's nothing for me to seek out there, unfortunately. So the best I can do is make sure you have a good home to return to.
And we can do this together.
He nods. And I think your sister, so she definitely, grabs your arm, but doesn't really say anything. Your mom doesn't move away, but she still just can't bring herself to look you in the eyes. We might see her try to, her begin to glance up, and then just relents, and, she can't do it.
I would like to say that in that panel, the colors are also faded. Like everywhere else, they've been this rich color since his dad has appeared on the scene.
Is there anything else you'd like to mention or bring up?
Who is that guy? Also, how did he get upstairs?
So, yeah, Tate asked that, and from the stairs leading down to the basement, he gets a reply from that guy as he says,
Well, I'm glad you asked. My name is Nathaniel, though people have also referred to me as the Soul Seer. I happen to be the bridge between this world.
He makes a grandiose gesture to everything. He just, twirls his hand around.
And the world of spirits. In times past, my particular position has been referred to as the Avatar. These days, considering my capabilities, I much more prefer the title Soul Seer.
And he takes a swig from the bottle of whiskey he found upstairs.
Tate's like, okay. That's a lot to take in. Oh, suddenly there are two worlds, and this guy is somehow able to move back and forth, and oh, yes, he was, quote-unquote, the Avatar.
As he kind of just, saunters over to the family gathering, clearly having dipped a bit into this whiskey by this point, he says,
The more important question is, who are you?
And he points directly at Tate.
He's like, me? I'm Tate. And I apparently have the powers of some ancient god who's kind of an awful person.
Well, that's only half of the equation, isn't it? You might be Tate Temple to these people, but to the rest of the world, you fit a different role, don't you? Find yourself connected to the streams of life between every living thing in the world. You, my friend, are the conduit. The thing that connects all living creatures, the giver and the taker. The material to my spiritual, if you will.
Tate's just like, what? Again, a lot to this has been a lot.
And I think he pulls back a little bit and he says, I can see by the confused look on your face that this is a lot to take in. So here, take a swig. And he holds out the whiskey and your dad forcefully pushes the whiskey back to him.
Yes.
And he shrugs and says, all right, well, I can see that the evening's getting away from us, that you have a lot of catching up to do. I don't want to intrude too much. I just heard my name called. So why don't we regroup in the morning and have a little bit of a talk about your role in the nature of all things. Temple family, I bid you adieu. I'm going to go find a bed upstairs. And he pivots and leaves. There's a speech bubble from Sky saying he better not take my bed.
Yes.
And your mom probably turns to your dad, Hadid, and says, is he staying with us? You disappear for a year and you bring a stranger into our home? And Hadid just slowly nods and says, and Nathaniel's an important piece to helping Tate. I had to offer him something for him to help get me back home. And your mom says, speaking of, what is this? And she points to the giant magical symbol in the middle of the basement.
The elephant in the room, so to speak.
Yeah.
I want to say that it's always been on panel.
Yes.
Like, just in different point of views, it has always been visible and very present and glowy.
Right. So the next panel we pull out so that we can see your family standing off to the side and the whole thing in frame. And your dad says, it's... honest to God, it's a teleportation circle to the sanctum in the Pacific Northwest. Your mom doesn't have words. She just like slowly nods, and Sky says, I want to go. And she starts like going over to it.
On the one hand, I want to grab her back and be like, no. But on the other hand, I'm like, I want to go too. So like, I want to like grab her arm, like as it, like to make it look like I would stop her. But then you just see them being like, no, together.
And then your dad grabs your arm as the two of you are going off together. And he says, perhaps in the morning. I don't know how it fully works yet. It's already been a long, tiring night. Maybe we can just leave the teleportation circle alone for the evening.
Does it ever stop glowing?
I don't know.
We won't need a light down here anymore, I guess.
I think your mom leaves the room at this point, having been so overwhelmed with strangeness.
I think that's fair, but I'm going to look at my dad and be like, go after her.
He nods, takes a few steps, then turns around and says, follow me out of the basement, so I know you're not going to try to jump through the portal.
You see a look of disappointment, probably on both of their faces.
Yes, definitely on both of their faces. The evening's going to progress, and I think your family as a whole are going to get tired. You know, even though your father, who's been missing for a while, has just come home, he's exhausted. The teleportation physically took a toll on him. The next panel I want to jump to is whenever it is that Tate finally goes to his room to just settle in and to pick up all of this again in the morning. He goes into his room. Maybe he picks up some things that have fallen over.
Yeah, this is when he notices the broken thing.
Oh, yeah, and he like holds it up and just like looks at it for a moment before...
Yeah, he'll put it aside to like fix later.
Maybe just when he like sits in bed and gets ready to go to sleep, his closet door opens, and standing there is an individual in a trench coat who walks into the room and says, I think you and I need to have a bit more of a personal conversation. Do you mind if I take a seat?
As long as you don't share the bed with me.
No, I don't plan on sleeping here. Turns out you have a lovely guest room. Pillows are a bit firm, though. And he'll stroll over, and the way I picture him sitting is so that, like, you guys are sitting on opposite edges of the bed, so you're back to back talking. And he's taller than you, and he's still wearing that stupid coat, and you could just smell, he smells like cigarette smoke and whiskey.
So it feels like one of those old, like, spy things where they're sitting on benches facing opposite directions.
Yeah, exactly. And he says, I asked you a very important question earlier. Who are you? And I think you have some idea as the answer. Not just Tate's temple, but there's more going on, isn't there? You feel a call, a very dangerous one, don't you? A call to destruction.
Not destruction, per se, but I do have these powers. And you'll see, like, a slight ripple as he just, for a moment, activates it, and everything goes a little dim around him. So not to destruction, but to use what I have.
He probably gives, like, a little bit of a, shiver sound effect, like a shh, just like SHHH in asterisks, once you, like, just vaguely pull on your powers. Like, he felt it a little bit, and he'll say, the paths that you can walk both end in ruin. Your uncle tried not to indulge in the capabilities granted by a family curse, and doing so, it's ultimately brought about his demise. On the inverse, overusing your powers not only hurts the world around you, but will feed the very thing that you wish to destroy.
He said that I was destruction. I think that's my choice, right? This is just a tool. It all just matters on how you use it.
There's a small chuckle, and Nathaniel says, so you fancy yourself more of a hero? than a destroyer. You gonna start running around in a cape?
No capes. I don't like being told who I am or what I can do. I think, again, that's my choice. And so if he says that the only thing that I can do is destroy, I'm going to prove him wrong.
Well, for all of our sakes, I certainly hope you do.
And then I'll punch him in the stupid face.
There's another chuckle. And Nathaniel says, have you ever even been in a fight before?
Not with people?
I'll add it to the training list.
You'll see Tate's head actually turn at that. You're like, training list?
Yeah, you hear some scribbling as he's like writing in a notepad. And then he stands up and says, you know what I think after just talking to you for a little bit, I can tell that you have the determination to be whoever you want to be. And it sounds to me like you can certainly put these powers to good use helping the community. I don't think you need to be a destroyer at all. Hopefully you don't prove me wrong.
Does he say that out loud and loud, or does he say that sort of under his breath?
He says that out loud, straight to your face. In fact, he's attempting to shift your labels. You could either reject his influence or you can accept it.
What is he trying to shift?
It sounds like he's telling you that you can be a hero, that you don't need to just be a massing hulk of danger.
So he's dropping my danger and increasing something else?
Increasing savior.
I think that's reasonable, right? That's the goal. I see myself as a danger. I have seen myself as a very dangerous person, but maybe I don't need to be in order to do what I want.
I think that even just thinking about that, maybe this doesn't even dawn on Tate, or maybe it does when this Nathaniel eventually leaves and Tate goes to like lay down. But the way he tried to shift your labels is more or less lining up with exactly how Tate seemed to answer the question. So he's basically just trying to reinforce Tate's own opinion of himself.
Yeah, that's totally fair.
Yeah.
I mean, I will accept this new label because it means that he can be a hero, which is really what he wants.
Right. So I think that puts you at +2 danger, +2 savior now.
That is correct.
And this Nathaniel will leave pretty much as quietly as he walked in.
Through the closet?
He actually goes in through your regular door, but the closet door is still open. Like, he never closed it, because I guess he's an asshole.
I mean, I'll get up and just look in the closet.
Yeah, there's nothing in there.
Oh, okay. I just in case, like after he leaves, just to make sure.
Yeah.
And then I will shut it very firmly and go to bed.
Yeah. And Tate goes to bed, and we are once again brought to that large wooden door with that really nice, ornate, heavy iron handle. And there's muffled screams coming from behind the door. And Tate's, once again, you're standing in front of this door.
He's in a different mindset this time. And so before, he really wanted to prove that he could be a hero. But I think with Nathaniel's words, it's less of, I need to prove this to other people, and more, I am already this. I just have to show it. Instead of like, sort of that hesitant or like aggressive opening the door, he like takes a breath and confidently like reaches for the knob, like he is ready for whatever is on the other side.
And the knob is still as heavy to turn as it was before, but you can still turn through it. And once the door is cracked, Tate's once again overwhelmed by this bright light. But this time, I don't think it burns his eyes. I think he can see right through it. And what he sees when he opens the door is this. It looks like an office, probably several stories up in the sky. There's a full windowed wall straight across from him that looks over a city. It looks over Horizon City. And the screaming is coming from outside these windows, probably on ground level. He can hear it. They're all louder now. There's more screaming. And hovering in front of the windows is this entity with this golden aura. These several white, pristine, feathery wings protruding from its back. This is a humanoid with these white, pristine wings, and it's hovering in place. It's not even flapping the wings. When you walk in or when you open the door, this person turns towards Tate, and Tate can see that this person's eyes are white and deep. Like you can look into them forever and never stop finding answers to questions that you didn't even know you wanted to ask. This entity, this thing, this angel holds you in its gaze, and it speaks in this foreign tongue, but you understand the words to be, I can liberate you. Find me. City Hall. Remembrance Day. What is the last panel of this issue?
Considering how dramatic all of that was, you will not have seen Tate once he entered the door, because you'll just be seeing this scene that's slowly focused in on this person who's now looking back, like seeing the eyes, but only the speech bubble. I want to say that after he says that, it will shift back to Tate. This will be one of the very first times you'll see him smile, and it'll just end with him saying, I'll see you there.
At the end of every session for the Doomed, we answer the question, did you make progress on defeating your nemesis?
I think absolutely this time.
Yeah, I will lean much harder towards yes this time around than before. You met the quote-unquote other half, whatever that means. And I think you've reaffirmed your initial standpoint that we were kind of uncertain about at the end of the prelude.
Yeah, before it was something that I wanted, but it was really just a reaction in anger because of everything that he had just gone through. But this time, there's a little bit more confidence because, I mean, you've mentioned that adults can exert influence, but the entire issue, everything has been away, everything has sort of been against him in some ways. And he just got 2 pieces of very positive reinforcement towards his goal. Like his dad saying, this is you have the power to change this. And Nathaniel saying, you can do this, you can be the hero.
You can be the hero that you want to be. Yeah, I would agree. So you can go ahead and mark another potential. Hey, podcast friends, it's me, Mr. Critically Accursed, popping in at the end of the issue to say a fancy little hello and a thank you for listening to issue number 7, The Conduit. We appreciate you hanging around for this hour of tabletop RPG goodness, and I really hope you've been enjoying yourself. I'm not going to reiterate some of the same things I've reiterated at the end of these issues, because all of our contact information should be in the description of this particular episode, wherever you're listening to it out in the wide, wide internet. What I will still say, however, is please definitely say stuff to us about our podcast, or about yourself, or about your interests. I would love, and the rest of us would love to hear from you guys who are listening and enjoying our content, because communities are great. I think communities built up around these tabletop podcasts is the best thing about all of it. So, we've been recording all of these way in advance of release. I have no idea, even at this point, how this podcast is working out. I can only hope and imagine. But if you haven't said anything, if you hadn't, reviewed an episode or added anyone in our cast on Twitter or, I don't know, any number of ways to reach out to us, if you haven't done that, do it. Please, do it. I'm begging you. I'm, legitimately begging you to say words to me. Please, human contact is important, and I don't get any. So, thanks for listening. We will see you in issue number 8. Seraph.
You're a superhero.